You can invest tens of millions of rubles in equipment, create a very beautiful and acoustically correct room, install expensive, stylish recliner chairs, and in general, set up the home theater the right way. But if you don't take the very last step meticulously, attentively, and as professionally as possible, all that work could go to waste. Hello everyone, this is Anton, and you're on the Blackroom channel. In this video, we'll discuss what true professional calibration is. Why is it so important to do it? And what happens if you suddenly decide not to do it? Let's get started. Let's begin with a classic, general definition of what calibration actually means, because this term comes up in all sorts of technical fields and in relation to any kind of equipment. Essentially, it's about bringing the parameters of a certain object to the target values. Target values are within a certain range of target parameters so that it matches those things for which it was created, the product it is supposed to deliver. We create home theaters. And for us, calibration is about what we see with our eyes and hear with our ears when we're sitting in our seats and want to watch our favorite movie in the highest possible quality. So, what does that mean? It means we need to bring the sound and picture in line with certain standards. These standards, of course, exist in the industry. Yes, there are several of them, and yes, they complement each other, and listing them all now, we're not going to do that. But there are also organizations that train specialists so they can get the image on your projection screen, or even a non-projection screen, and your audio system as close as possible to those industry standards that are generally considered, so to speak, ideal. Gradually, comprehensive standards are emerging, like CDARP 22. This is a new standard. It relates to sound in home theaters, setting 4 boundaries and 4 levels of performance specifically for audio systems, and essentially guarantees you a certain level of immersion from your audio system. And calibration is essentially designed to squeeze every last bit of performance out of your audio system, no matter what kind it is. Video calibration allows you to get the most out of your video system. And a video system is not just a screen. If you have a TV, then the screen is what you're maximizing. If it's a classic home theater, then most often there will be a video projector, like we have. Here in the showroom, there's also a large projection screen. And that's what we need to bring as close as possible to ideal standards, or at least get as close as the situation allows. The equipment, the room, because the room is also part of the system, both for audio and video, and accordingly, other parameters like lighting, light leakage, and when it comes to sound, there's a whole world of factors. There are organizations in the world like ISF, or Imaging Science Foundation. So ISF is an example of such an organization that brings standards, quality, and accessibility of this science to the world, so that people can learn how to calibrate any display in their home in the most ideal and optimal way, whether it's a projector with a screen, a television, or an LED display, bringing it as close as possible to the industry standards that the content was created for in terms of calibration. When it comes to the audio part or sound, things are a bit more complicated, because our homes are all different. It's not the same as a big movie theater, where we go, buy tickets, and watch movies. The conditions for watching and listening at home are very different. This is especially true for sound, because the speakers of small rooms are not the same as the speakers of large spaces. Here, we have significantly more problems, and achieving a similar immersive effect with multi-channel sound in a small room is much more difficult, especially when it comes to low frequencies to bass. Creating smooth, rich, proper, and consistent bass in several spots is a real challenge. It's one of the toughest tasks in the world for audiophiles and movie enthusiasts, and throughout history, with varying degrees of success, there have been organizations like THX, Dolby, and others, all of which have offered some kind of fragmented training and certification. But in reality, nowadays, if you want to go study, pass some kind of test, and get a certificate that guarantees, or at least remotely indicates, that you now understand the essence and know how to calibrate things, to squeeze every last drop out of a home theater audio system and get amazing, immersive sound and a sense of being drawn into what's happening on the screen. There's no such organization except for HAA, or the Home Acoustic Alliance, and this organization, like many other things in our not very large or wealthy audio-video industry, was created by Jerry LeMay, an American who still carries this mastery forward. He's been spreading this knowledge to the masses, and I was lucky enough to be his student 3 years ago. In 2021, I traveled and flew to the States for the CEDIA Expo, and at the same time completed the training. The courses were for HAA, the Home Acoustic Alliance, and ISF. So what about HAA? Home Acoustic, the Acoustic Alliance holds several events a year in different places around the world. These trainings, these courses, yes, of course, they do cost a decent amount of money. And it's people like me who are passionate about home theater, home cinemas, or just audio in general who go there to learn. Because there, everything really starts from the basics and ends with practical lab classes, where you actually go through the process yourself. You go from absolute zero all the way to the end, doing everything yourself. This is the calibration process, following principles that lead to real results.
Anton, you've talked a lot about calibration being a set of certain standards. So, does that mean we need to bring everything to the same values during the calibration process, or is it actually an individual process for each specific cinema hall?
If it were an individual process for each theater, then we wouldn't be able to treat it as a science. To have some kind of system, to teach it, to communicate it, and to make sure that people can achieve repeatable results in different rooms and different projects of varying complexity, different formats, and so on. These are more like general principles that allow you to get the most out of almost any audio system in any room. By bringing it up to the standards that generally exist in the industry, you can squeeze out the maximum performance. The point is that you base everything on the effect you actually get. That's why the very first stage is essentially checking the system and doing a real, live listening test, if we're talking about sound. Just like you can turn on a TV and spot obvious flaws in the picture. You can also play your favorite tracks, the ones you know well and are familiar with how they sound on a good, perfectly calibrated system, even if it's in different rooms, with different equipment, and with various acoustic setups or room sizes. But at the core, there's a clear set of criteria you can use to evaluate, and this initial assessment is just the foundation. There are actually 6 criteria you can use to calculate certain indexes, like how much you felt was sufficient or lacking on a 10-point scale for each of these 6 parameters. Only after that do all the other stages come in. And they're also regulated. They weren't just made up for no reason. It's kind of like a technical map or a technical process, and by going through it, you're guaranteed to get the right result. Or you might get stuck at a certain stage, and until you fix or correct it, you might not be able to move forward at all, because everything else you do after that, within this calibration process, could end up being pointless. Of course, there are always deviations. Every system is different, the number of channels varies, the types of speakers are different, the amplifier technologies and everything else can all be different. Basically, there are a huge number of variables involved, so it's an entire system, but ideally, the principles it's built on should be the same. You need to understand those principles. You just have to come in, get a feel for the system, and understand its architecture. But not everyone is capable of this, and those who are exactly the ones who can handle calibrating complex systems. And based on your understanding of the system's architecture, you can then go through the technical process. And then, in the end, if you do everything right, if you have a good ear, and you know what you're doing, and so on and so forth, you get the result. That emotional result, like feeling emotions, tears in your eyes, and whatever you play on this system, you just get pure enjoyment. But if we dig a little deeper into the actual process, into this technical roadmap, I can cover it right now. Well, at least in broad strokes, by the main top-level categories, so to speak, because honestly, there are detailed checklists for all of this. Right now, you can see roughly what a full HAA calibration checklist looks like. But I should point out right away that I didn't just study at HAA. I also learned from Tony Grimani and Adam Pels. These are people who calibrate 100 to 200 home theaters per year. These are real professionals, traveling all over the world with 2 suitcases full of tools, who truly know their craft. I consider these people my teachers, true masters and gurus, and they are the ones I look up to. But the HAA process itself, which covers the entire huge checklist, allows you to walk into an unfamiliar room, assess the system, then check the system, physically inspect everything, and make certain adjustments to the room and the equipment. with the placement of the speakers and so on, so that even in just 4 hours, you can achieve results. This is what's called turbo calibration. There's such a concept. There's turbo calibration and there's full calibration. Turbo calibration is designed to be done in 4 hours. Some things are skipped there, like fine-tuning the equalization of each individual speaker, for example, but the basic elements are still included. In general, there are a number of technical steps that are important to complete before moving on to more detailed adjustments, like setting the delay levels for the speakers. And then you move on to the final listening test. Because if you miss something at the physical level, at the configuration stage of a particular piece of equipment, you might end up sending the wrong signal to the speaker. And this incorrect signal will prevent you from getting out of the audio system what you know it's capable of, how it can ideally be set up at the most basic level. For example, the crossover. Let's say it's supposed to be set at 80 Hz, but you have it set at 150, and you didn't check that, and then you try to EQ it or blend it with the subwoofers, but it's never going to work. The subwoofer doesn't reach up to 150 Hz. It tops out at around 100, so you end up with a dip in the sound, and you're just sitting there, not understanding what's going on. Well, you didn't check it. You just skipped the previous step and didn't check it off the list. That's exactly why checklists are so useful and important. But considering that I studied not only at the Home Acoustic Alliance, but I'm still continuing to learn from my other teachers and mentors as well, my full process it consists of slightly modified and expanded checklists of what I do, and this allows me to get guaranteed results every single time. In terms of real emotions, for me, the most important rule is that before you play anything through the system, whether it's stereo, multi-channel, or any movie clips, any content, even if you're not familiar with it, instantly grabs you, pulls you into the screen, and you just get completely immersed in the audio-video system. That's the most important final indicator. Yes, it breaks down into clarity, into how the surrounding sounds move around, how evenly, how the voice moves around the room, how pleasant, natural, rich, and thrilling the bass is, how dynamic the gunshots are, and so on and so forth. Yes, it all breaks down into these things, but overall, when everything comes together, you can actually experience this effect. Right here in our showroom, friends. If you've ever thought about building your own home theater and have never been to a Dolby Atmos showroom with a 9.1.6 setup, especially one like ours, Alcon's Audio, Dutch ribbon speakers. They're considered the Tesla of the audio world. Here we have an equipped cinema room. You can see the acoustic panels here. All of this contributes to the sound quality. Even the way I'm recording this video right now, even through this lavalier mic, I'm sure you can hear how clear my speech is. It's super comfortable to be here. And of course, watching movies and listening to music here is pure pleasure. So, if you're planning a home theater, I invite you to come visit us. We'll show you around, explain everything, give you a demonstration, and discuss how we can bring your project to life. Just leave a request using the link in the description, or message us on any of our social networks. Whether it's our Telegram channel or our website, you can sign up for a test drive of the showroom. In short, come visit us. And since I'm a practicing calibrator, it was important for me to develop my own technical roadmap or workflow protocol that I personally follow. I go out and calibrate real home theaters using this process. That's why I put together a summary of everything I've learned from my teachers and mentors. I have my own little template, that I use to calibrate each system. Theater, because there are differences. There are differences in processors, and there are differences in audio systems. So, friends, to say that I have HAA, that I have a certificate, the Home Acoustic Alliance Level 3 Advanced Certificate, yes, that does mean something. It probably means that I truly understood the whole philosophy, absorbed all the knowledge, and managed to pass the exam. I took 3 exams one after another, each one harder than the last. And to get this highest grade, according to the Home Acoustic Alliance. Here you can see a screenshot from the website. You could easily find me there. So, there's the certificate, and there's the toolkit. Because of course, you need the right tools and calibration. If you used to think it was just about setting things up, just like that, one little microphone, press a button, start, all the speakers hiss a bit, and you get the result? No, my friends, I hate to disappoint you, but that's not how it works. For the full process, for the entire procedure, from the initial check all the way to the final content listening sessions, it takes me at least 2 days. So I use everything. Both these types of microphones and these calibrators for the microphones. I even use multiple microphones at the same time, and well, that's already more of a video topic, actually. But of course, if we're calibrating speakers, it's impossible to do it without this kind of microphone. One of them alone costs, I think, about $1,500. All of this costs money, and all this equipment is needed at some point. That's part of the whole calibration procedure. But that's not the most important thing. It's not really about the money you spent on the equipment, although at some point that does become pretty important. What's more important is understanding the process itself and the result you're aiming for, and the physics behind all of this. We understand that physics, and every time we achieve a perfect result. Well, friends, it's 6 p.m. now. We started around noon today. This isn't our first time doing this, which is why it went so quickly, and only now are we just starting to measure the system. ARC, or anthem room correction. A lot of things had to be checked in advance. Many things needed to be set up, fine-tuned, and in some cases, we had to dig deep into the system's brain, wherever possible. And we have this checklist with almost 50 items that we follow every time. Because this process is strictly scientific, and you can't skip a single step, otherwise you'll regret it later. That's already about evaluating the results. If you skip something, you might just have to go back and spend a few more hours doing it, step by step. So it's better to go through each item one by one. Now let's move on a bit to the video part. What is ISF? ISF calibration. By the way, I also have an ISF certificate. I've shown it more than once on this channel. Here it is, actually in a frame. Level 3. This is also calibration for the video part. ISF training is actually really extensive. You get a complete understanding of how images are represented in electronic format, how it first gets onto media, how it's processed, edited, and then how it's transmitted through a TV screen. And within which standards all of this exists, how many standards there are, what you can adjust and how, and with what tools. All to bring the image as close as possible to industry standards. In short, just briefly, there are SDR and HDR, and unfortunately these two modes overlap, the need for calibration. So you adjust separately how your projector or TV displays in SDR, and then you adjust separately how it displays in HDR, because the rules and principles that apply there. The image appears on the screen so that it looks exactly like what the colorist saw in their studio. Well, it's actually very different. And the calibration is also very different. Special spectrophotometers are used there to precisely determine colors and color balance. Colorimeters are less accurate, but they are profiled using more precise devices and with more faster speed, which already allows for calibration to be done. It's like a computer's eye that, by looking at an image, for example, at the color white or red, can determine how truly white it is and whether it matches the industry standard. D65 is a concept known as the white point in the television industry. So that under sunlight, a white sheet of paper looks just like itself, just as you see it in real life. Take a look at it on a sunny day, and then see what you have on your home theater screen. That's exactly what white balance is. And the way white is intended to look, that's exactly how it should appear on your screen. Not a more yellowish or bluish white. And this is one of the industry standards. It's exactly this standard that these devices, with the help of special software and a laptop, help you achieve. The image on your screen. Of course, devices like these generators are used, but I've already talked about all this equipment and all the tools I personally use for audio and video calibration. The next parameter is gamma. Gamma is a function that basically determines how bright or dark different parts of the image should be, depending on the input signal. And if the image doesn't match this function, it will either look washed out or very gloomy. And when the gamma is set correctly, you see the image with the proper brightness levels. So, for example, a black t-shirt will look black, but the white letters on it will always appear super bright. According to the standards, there are a lot of nuances, and a trained eye can tell when something is off. With images using special patterns, which can be found either on a laptop or in these kinds of generators. And again, it helps to eliminate these issues. In other words, it gets rid of image artifacts and brings the image up to industry standards. This requires a deep understanding of what can be achieved and how, using the right instruments, experience, and all of the necessary equipment. When you understand what results you can achieve and which controls to adjust, and you've done it many times before, this, again, ensures repeatable results and guarantees that you'll get the most for your money. And a projector bought for 2 to 3 million rubles for a home theater won't end up performing like a projector that costs 500,000.
Do you need to calibrate just once, or is it a process that should be repeated a couple of times a year?
The answer is, it depends. It depends, but first of all, you shouldn't calibrate equipment that's just been installed and turned on. This applies to both sound and picture. All of them have a certain period called break-in or burn-in, when their main characteristics reach their optimal working parameters. After about 100 hours of use, you can start calibrating projectors, whether they're lamp-based or laser. It makes sense, because otherwise part of the work might just go to waste. The projector might not be perfectly tuned, since the parameters could physically shift. For an audio system, it's enough to run it for 2 to 3 days with some kind of, at a normal volume, play special test tracks designed for burning in the speakers, so to speak, or just some multi-channel music or movies, so the speakers get some use. After that, you can come in and calmly spend 2 days calibrating it. Recalibration. When it comes to video, of course, it really depends on the equipment. If it's a lamp, then after 1,000 to 2,000 hours, the lamp's brightness really drops off, usually, especially if it's being used at full power. If something in the projection room changes, like, for example, in a home theater, the walls were white, and you decided to improve the contrast, painted everything black, covered it in velvet, hung up all sorts of things. Of course, recalibration is needed because a projected image always consists of 2 components. It's the video system, actually 3, the screen, the projector, and the room itself, because the reflected light changes the image. So, if you repaint the walls, recalibration is required for the screen. A laser projector is the most stable option. If the room doesn't change, then you definitely don't need to recalibrate a laser projector for up to 20,000 hours. The image will remain stable. The brightness might decrease a little, but it's nothing compared to a lamp projector. As for the audio system, in general, if nothing changes, nothing moves, nothing burns out or fails, accordingly, as long as everything physically continues to operate within its specified parameters, recalibration is not required. If you change the furniture, change the carpet, or, I don't know, put one in where there was a hard floor before, if you add acoustic panels or move them around, then, of course, it's better to check. In short, if the system parameters haven't changed and everything is working, then no. But if you've changed significant things in the room, like moving, God forbid, the speakers, to a different spot, then of course you need to set everything up again. Basically, with calibration, we bring to the surface all the value that was created in the previous stages. And unfortunately, as my experience shows, a certain set of qualities is important. It's important to have a systems mindset, as I've come to realize, to understand how this whole system works as a whole. The room, the equipment, each individual speaker, both audio and video, and even how the furniture affects things. All of this matters. And apparently, this combination of qualities is pretty rare, which is why there are very few professional calibrators in the world who are especially well known. And by the way, friends, as far as I know, Blackroom, represented by myself, is the only company that holds both of these certificates, both ISF and Home Acoustic Alliance. So if you want top quality sound and picture, you definitely need to come to us. And as you can see, the topic is so vast and profound. And now I've just opened it up actually, so I've just given you a little peek inside. That's why, friends, if you still have questions, and I'm sure you will, please write all your questions in the comments. I'll do my best to personally answer every single one. We'll discuss calibration, and if there are any especially interesting questions or maybe even new topics that come up, I'll make a separate video just for those from the comments. And of course, friends, please support me in creating content. Don't forget to like the video. This was Anton with you, the founder of Blackroom, the company where you should definitely order your home theater if you want to get the most for your money. We'll see each other again very soon in new videos. Bye everyone.